Welcome back to the Priority Wellness Podcast. This month we have special guest host Michael Briggs. He was on last month and he just wanted more and he came back. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
And today we also have a very special guest, Miss Jackie Slate. Jackie, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. So you are a jack of all trades. You have a master's in social work.
Yes.
And you were a therapist for a little bit, decided you didn't like it, and now you're going to nursing school.
Yes.
And in the middle of all that, you decided, what the hell? I'm going to become an EMT.
Yeah.
And we have New York's newest EMT with us today, guys.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Fresh off the press last week, so.
Have you done any calls yet? Have you been on an ambulance since?
Not since then. Of course I did do ride time. So right. I did that. I haven't yet. I've had 2 nursing exams since then, so haven't had a chance to be on the ambulance yet, but
you were supposed to be on a shift with me last week and you bailed.
I did.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Well, I'm not kidding about it, but you did. But
yeah, no, I double booked myself, so I know.
She saw Kollin Hardy as her partner. She's like, oh no.
So what made you want to go into EMS? What made you want to become an EMT?
Well, so I was looking at what I wanted to do. So, as you said, I switched fields. So I was originally a therapist, and my wife has actually been a paramedic. Well, she's been an EMT for 10 years. And so with her group of friends, with y'all included, obviously, I heard a lot about what you all have done, and it just was really intriguing to me. And I've always had an interest in medicine, just, haven't really took the plunge. And so I looked into nursing and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. I really like it. And so I applied back in 2021. And I was like, wow, I really like this. And I kind of came to realize that nobody really seems to have appreciation for what EMTs do. And so I was like, well, that doesn't really seem fair. And I don't really want to be that type of nurse. Obviously there are nurses who do have appreciation for what EMTs do, but, I have seen it firsthand as a nursing assistant and being in the hospital setting that sometimes I think that there's some misunderstanding, between the groups of people. And so I was like, you know what? Maybe I do want some of that appreciation myself. So I took the leap and took the class this summer, and I discovered I loved it. And,
Mind you, that was an accelerated EMT class.
Yeah.
3 days a week during the day, on top of going to full-time nursing school, doing 10 patient contacts, studying for your EMT exams and all that. It's crazy. A lot of people can't do that when they don't even work a job. So to be able to work, go to school full-time as a nursing student, and then also do full-time EMS student, that's pretty big.
Yeah, we're going to use you as an example to nobody should complain.
Exactly. I
of
don't
how
hear any
hard
complaints.
this is.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a challenge. It was definitely a challenge working full time. I know there were days that I was up for, I think my record, which not advocating for people to do this, but I think 43 hours was my record for no sleep. Definitely don't recommend, but I did do that. It was not something, again, I recommend, but I did do that, and
But you powered through it.
I did power through it, and
you're still powering through it.
I'm still powering through it, but I'm trying to reach my goals and do what I can do, and so I think a new goal I have, and we'll see if I get there, is doing flight nursing. So, I'm going to have to push myself to get there, and
staying in EMS.
In EMS. So that's not where I saw myself initially. I think one of the reasons that I originally did nursing with mental health was because I wanted to do psychiatric nursing. that was the whole reason I originally went into that, and that changed. So, but
cool.
I mean,
And then
still
if you,
combining the worlds.
if you stick to your EMS gig, you know, you can go to paramedic school, and you could be a dual threat and be a flight paramedic, flight RN.
Yeah.
Like one of our board members, Krista. You know, so
Yep.
yeah. So I have a question for you. So you are a therapist still. It hasn't gone away. You're still
Right.
a therapist, and you have a lot of experience as a therapist. So I guess I'd ask, what guidance would you like to send to first responders all around, and their families who may be listening to the podcast? Because families are an important part of the topic as well, because families can suffer just as much when mental health is not taken care of in their spouse or father, mother, whoever that may be. So what messages or guidance would you give to them?
Well, I think, like I mentioned, my wife has been an EMT for 10 years. And so obviously I've seen firsthand that, you know, calls can definitely impact the provider. They can impact the family. They can impact your friends. They can impact everyone. So I think that a big part of it is shame. I think people don't want to talk about when they have a really challenging call. I think a big part I've learned is that EMTs use dark humor. And I mean,
I feel like you're calling me out.
The darkest of all
Yeah.
the humor we have.
Yeah. I mean, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I think we all cope in different ways.
Yep.
And I mean, I've kind of found myself using dark humor as a therapist. I think we all cope, like I said, in different ways. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think learning to talk about it. And it doesn't mean that you have to sit there and like a little therapy circle and just sit there and go, this is what I did on my call. And this was what was really traumatic for me. I mean, nobody is asking you to do that. But I think sometimes just sitting there and like, just being like, hey, that kind of sucked. And, you know, whatever, just admitting that maybe it was a bit challenging and then doing something for yourself after that is really powerful. So just taking a moment for yourself and recognizing, at the very least, just recognizing that it was hard is a huge thing. Because I think sometimes we just want to be like, okay, water off a duck's back, water off a duck's back. Like, it wasn't hard. I'm fine. Like, okay, sometimes you're not fine, and that's okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's really big. It's really big. And I like what you said about it doesn't have to be, you know, or with the crew that you just want to.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we just don't realize that we're doing it.
Yeah, I came to realize that as a spouse of someone is that her family in EMS and as a support system, you can find whoever friends or it doesn't have to be a certain prescribed exactly. It can be you guys here at PW. It's just somebody you need to find.
Family. I mean, family isn't always going to be blood.
Right.
This organization, obviously, and after the board meeting, we'll stick around and talk to each other. We could be here for an hour or two. Just that in of itself is its own little peer time to discuss. It's not anything about Emily and things like that. So
I'd mentioned in being with your congratulations. It's coming up. Talk a little bit more about that. And you know, is Suicide Prevention Month. Those sort of things, big episodes. We lose too many people.
I think burnout is one of those, and you don't notice it until it's medical. I think, again, I mentioned shame earlier is happening because they're like, I'm here for 20 years, or I have this coworker's months, and they're already feeling burnout. It calls you've been on, or maybe the fact that your burnout can affect you at any point. Burnout just happens. It just stress. Self-care, I know that, and it can be really frustrating, and people get really frustrated because they're like, but honestly, to be mindful. And when I say be just care of yourself. So letting things pile onto you, like we were talking about with like calls earlier, and it's easier said than done, of course. Take a step back and start taking care. It's important to take a step back and to see that's higher up. I know that sometimes those conversations can be uncomfortable, but if you feel comfortable being like, hey, I'm having a difficult time. Can I like take a breather? have that conversation. I think some program heads are a little more comfortable having that conversation now than they maybe would have in the 90s.
Yeah.
Right. And we've talked about that before too.
Right.
So for people who might not find it easy to identify that they're having a hard time before it's too late, what would you say to them?
So, I mean, sometimes it's not a mental thing. Sometimes it's a physical thing. So I think for some people, like they will notice like, okay, maybe I'm not sleeping as well, or maybe I've noticed my appetite's increased, or maybe I've noticed that I'm more jittery than usual, or, you know, there's a lot of different ways that it can manifest, but you're just feeling off, or maybe you're just dragging more than usual. It can manifest itself in a lot of different ways, but you're just not feeling yourself. You're not feeling as productive as usual. You're maybe feeling more tense than usual. It can really, you're just not feeling you. And so I think that it's just something to look out for. It does normally feel an emotional way, but it can definitely, like I say, manifest itself in a physical way too. And I think that that's maybe where people might notice it if they're maybe not as attuned to their emotional state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not necessarily a bad idea to, well, let me retract my words a little bit. Is it a bad idea to point it out in somebody else if you notice it?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, because that's the thing is like, as a family, as an EMS family, it's good to look out for each other. So, I mean, if you're noticing those things, I mean, maybe not for the one, like you're eating too much, like, maybe not pointing that out to someone, but if you've noticed that, like, hey, I noticed that, like,
that's your fifth cheeseburger today.
Yeah, maybe not pointing that out, but like, hey, I noticed that we normally watch movies together on night shift, but like, you're going to bed at 6 and waking up at 6. Like, I noticed you seem to be sleeping a lot more on shift, like, things like that. I don't see the harm in pointing out those types of things. Or I'm noticing that, like, we tend to joke around a lot, but you seem to be a little more short-tempered, maybe a little nicer. But again, you guys tend to have more of that sense of humor with each other that maybe they can take a joke more. But
to piggyback off that a little bit, because I just got a phone call from an EMS provider a couple weeks ago about this kind of topic, basically. And they wanted to know how to address changes in a provider that they've seen, some that they work with all the time. This provider is just concerned because they're worried that the other person is going down a path that may lead them to some self-harm in the future. And the issue is they don't know how to address it. It may not be easy for somebody to say, you know, I'm noticing some changes and I'm worried because either they may not take it the right way, or, you know, you don't want to cause any more adverse issues. Like, you don't want to bring something up if they're not ready to talk about it, things like that. So there is some avenues to approaching that. And one of them could be, you know, talking to your leadership and saying, hey, you know, I'm seeing Kollin's attitude changing. He's a little bit more bitter. He's not, you know, enjoying the activities that we used to do. PwC has an awesome new tool where you can send a message and some mental health resources to somebody anonymously. Talking to a coworker that you're comfortable with and ask if they'd maybe have a conversation with that person. But it can be a hard discussion to have sometimes. So
yeah. I mean, something as simple, even if you don't feel comfortable being as direct as in like, hey, I notice A, B, and C in you, even something as simple as like, hey, I'm here if you need to talk, or hey, like, do you want to grab coffee later today? Something like that. Even if you don't want to be direct. The important part is
following up on that too.
Yeah.
Because I think that a lot of times we say, hey, if you need to talk, let me know. And then that's just all it is.
Right.
But make sure you follow up. If you're going to offer that, and offer, you know, coffee or whatever, make sure you follow up with it, because they may just be waiting for you to say, you know, hey, did you want to go get that coffee? Because they're not going to bring it up. They're not going to ask you per se. So make sure if you make that offer that you follow up with it too. Yep.
That's a really good point, because I think a lot of times we have good intentions when we do that, but we don't always follow through. So that's a really good point, is making sure to follow through. But I think sometimes just sometimes knowing that we're there as support is
Yep.
a good
I agree.
lead in.
So I know that earlier you had mentioned that you once stayed up for 43 hours. So this question may not be the best to ask you, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
Okay.
How can first responders and their families work together to create a healthier work-life balance?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, sometimes that's an area in which I struggle. I'll admit that wholeheartedly. So, but I think that the good thing about finding a work-life balance, or sometimes a struggle in finding a work-life balance, is that
Or a work-life school balance.
work-life school balance.
Work-life school balance.
Yeah. I think sometimes there's challenges in that, right? I think sometimes it's a period or it's a thing in life that ebbs and flows in time. Sometimes we're really great at it. Sometimes we're really not so great in it. But I think it's one of those things that we need to rely on our support systems. I think that a big part in it is leaning on your supports a lot. So if you notice that you're struggling and finding that balance, it's really being comfortable and leaning into your support. So if you're noticing that you need a little help in one area, asking your support. So I know that there's been a couple times where I've had to lean out to my friends like, hey, my dogs need to be let out. Can you guys help let out my dogs? Or, hey, I have some extra homework, and like leaning to my wife, like, hey, can you help me do this? Mm-hmm. Or when she's needed me to help do things, then she's come to me. So I think doing that, and here's a big one, which I'm awful at this, is learning how to say no, because I'm awful at that. And I think a lot of us are. Yes, still learning how to do that, but learning how to say no, because the world will continue to revolve without you and, the little things. So, what I mean by that is like, if your boss asks you to pick up a 7th shift in a row, you can always say no.
I feel like that was definitely targeted at me. I am very literally about to work 7 shifts in a row starting on Friday, but it's all good.
So, they will find someone eventually to fill that extra shift. But the world needs you for a lot, but they don't need you for that 7th shift. So they need you for a lot of other things, but to fill a seat for that one thing, probably not. So
That's funny.
I think that's a big thing, though, is learning to say no and to lean on people for other things. So it's something I think a lot of people struggle with.
It's something that I struggled with for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And over the last 6 months or so, I've gotten great at it.
I mean, honestly, putting things in my calendar on my phone, and like I have Amanda and I use like the same calendar app. Yeah. I think that's helped tremendously, because when I started seeing how much I was overbooking myself, that was very eye-opening. And like seeing how our schedules sometimes clash too much where we weren't going to see each other for a long time, that made it a huge difference as well. So sometimes doing like a family calendar, or like even doing that with their friends, of like being like, hey, I noticed we're not going to see each other for like 3 months. Sometimes that's a bit eye-opening as well. Yeah. So I
love my calendar on my phone. I quite literally think that my world would grind to a halt if I could not access my Google Calendar, because I keep everything in there. Every little detail of what I'm doing throughout the day is in my Google Calendar.
Yep. And I can't remember. Sorry, I can't remember who it was. I think it's Chelsea. She calls her calendar her Bible.
Oh, yes. Yep. She
carries it around.
She pulled it out at the board meeting the last time, and she said, let me check my Bible. And she pulls out the calendar. Yep. Paper calendar.
Yes.
Paper calendar. Yep.
It's amazing that she doesn't have a flip phone.
I even have like a widget like on my home screen that like tells me everything all the time. That helps me, and I have a paper calendar too. Yeah. I have both, because you have to keep track of everything.
Yeah, so. I mean, I'll still be late to things. I mean, I had a webinar that I had to attend today at 3:00, and I looked at my phone and I was like, oh, it's 9 minutes past 3. I should probably log into that. So, I mean, I'll still be late to things, but at least you're going to be late to things.
Yeah.
So one thing that we like to talk about a lot with PwC is maintenance and maintenance of your mental health. And I'm curious what you have to say about maintenance for first responders and how that can help prevent burnout.
Yeah. Well, one thing I did mention before is self-care. So I think, again, I know it's kind of a buzzword that we use a lot, but I think finding activities that you really like to enjoy or that you really enjoy and doing them consistently and swapping them out. So, spooky season, I gotta mention it because we're that time of year. I know I'm speaking to your soul.
Oh yeah.
Like, I love going on hikes, so that's something that maybe I don't get to do all the time. I know I'm speaking to your soul, Kollin, on that one. But like being able to go on hikes and do things like that, spending time in nature, doing things that just kind of feel good for the soul. Finding those activities that you enjoy doing and building time into your schedule. Like, those are things that will maintain and make sure that like your mental health is staying as good as it can at most periods of time, because it's kind of like any other health condition. Like, you're going to want to do things to prevent things from happening, just like diabetes. Like, you're going to want to take care of like your diet and exercise to prevent diabetes from happening. You don't I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about maintenance. I mean,
right.
You go to the doctor, hopefully, every year, get a wellness checkup, just make sure things going, your body's working at top peak performance. We should do the same thing with our mental health. And I don't think that it has to be like therapy necessarily, right?
Correct.
But it can be those alternative things. We can still use therapy. Therapy's a very, very, very powerful and great tool to use.
Exactly.
But it's one of those tools in our tool belt. But those things that we talked about earlier, like talking with your partners, is one of those tools to keep your mental health tip top. And that's just one of those things. But
yeah.
And one of the things that we've said as an organization from the very beginning is end the stigma.
Yeah.
That's one of our goals with Priority Wellness Campaign.
It's like right above your head. It's
Yeah.
painted on the wall. Right above your
Hashtag.
head. Yeah, hashtag end the stigma.
So I think just making sure that it is okay to talk about it is important. And as we are in September, with it being Suicide Prevention Month, we put a what's it called?
It's a campaign for the month, but
But on our website, there is help. There is hope.
Yes.
Did I say that
Is that
backwards?
Right? You may have to check the website. I
Yeah,
feel like
there is help. There is hope. Yeah. Yes, I got that. Correct.
Sometimes I mix them up, so I don't know which one comes first, but we're good. Yeah.
Yes. So, and I think that is so important to realize.
I just don't understand. Sorry to cut you off, but I guess we talk about end the stigma, but when we say it's okay to talk about it, talking about it just means, how was your day? It could be just as simple as that.
Yep.
I had a rough day today. That's okay. Kollin, my gosh, we had 15 calls today and there was this difficult patient, and you just talk about it a little bit, and that's what it's okay to talk about. Just those simple things. It's not gonna be anything crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So no, it's a stigma for sure, but I think as a whole, I think that the stigma is declining for sure. We're moving into a era where it's okay to talk about your feelings and about how, your day went. Whereas 20, 30, 40 years ago, it wasn't okay. And we just kind of ignored it. And that's what caused a lot of the problems that we see today. But I think in general, we're moving in the right direction. And this organization, this podcast, everything that we're doing is helping to eliminate the stigma.
Absolutely. Well, I really loved having you on today, Jackie. And again, I appreciate you coming in, especially at the last minute, as we had a guest reschedule on us.
Yes.
And Michael, thank you for guest co-hosting today.
Oh, of course. It's been a pleasure.
It was wonderful having you back. Yeah. And as always, we are there for the mental health of first responders and everybody. Thank you.